Good morning, and thank you for joining us at the Faith Christian Methodist Episcopal Church here in historic Hidden Valley. Thank you to Pastor Gripper and the leadership team here at the church for letting us use their beautiful facility. And so, why are we here this morning? Not just to present our mid-year stats, but why are we physically here at this location? So later in the presentation, you're going to hear the major speak about violent crime affecting our juvenile members of the community. Well, recently, less than a mile from here, we found one of our 17-year-old members of the community murdered. 17 years old. So here we are coming to Hidden Valley to present our stats to you this morning. But before we get into those statistics, we want to go over two big initiatives that the Cmpd continues to undertake. First, recruitment remains one of our top priorities. Cmpd is continuing to hire for officers, and with that, we need to market the numerous opportunities that lie within the Cmpd. We have 13 patrol divisions, as well as countless specialized positions within the Cmpd. What I always like to say is the beautiful thing about the Cmpd is you can completely change jobs without having to change employers. Looking at my own career, I've been in patrol, crime reduction units, community coordinator, investigations, and now in public affairs. All those different jobs within a 20-year career, never having to change employers. We want to retain and hire the top talent that we have across the country. How are we doing that? With our new budget year, we are increasing starting pay for officers by 9% and then by 10.5% by January of 2023. We are also offering a $7,500 sign-on bonus for new recruits as well as lateral officers who come to the Cmpd. It should also be noted that we pay our officers, our recruits, from day one when they start the academy. They get paid through the academy. Whereas in other jurisdictions, those recruits may have to just do that on their personal time, and in some cases, those recruits actually have to pay to go through BLAT. So again, come here to the Cmpd where we will pay for your training. We will also pay you to go through our training. If you're interested or know someone who may be, find all the information that you need at charlottepolicejobs.org. In addition to hiring for officers, we are also hiring for telecommunicators. We just held a hiring blitz with 10 expedited offers made. We're excited to have 18 new telecommunicators joining our family here in August. The second initiative we want to speak of before we get into the data is Cmpd Serves. This is the Chief of Police flagship program. It's the first of its kind customer service program to be delivered to a police department, and it's helping to change the definition of policing. The core principle of Cmpd Serves is that we will deliver service that leaves a positive impression that will earn a genuine thank you. Our entire workforce, more than 2,600 employees, have all gone through this training program. At least 75 acts of excellence have been identified where officers have gone above and beyond in delivering that customer service to our customers who are our citizens. The Cmpd is excited to deliver Phase 2 of the program, which will roll out in September. This will focus on the application of work, internal culture, and employee wellness. So at this time, I want to invite Major Brian Foley to the podium, who's going to deliver our mid-year statistics. Major?
Thank you, Lieutenant. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank news media and all of our local citizens that are tuning in for this broadcast this morning. I wanted to touch on a couple of things. First, I want to reiterate thanks to the Reverend Dr. Gripper with Faith CME Church for hosting us today. When the Lieutenant was talking about the homicide that occurred less than half a mile from here, that in no way reflects upon the character of the Hidden Valley neighborhood. This community is a historic community. It is a long-term success story for CMPD and the community about reduction in crime and changes in the community. And that is the frustration level. When we work hard together, and then we have a youth that's senselessly murdered in the community. That's where we really get upset. That's where I get upset. I'm responsible for this area. And so that really hits me hard in the heart. The fact that the church and faith community here works with residents, works with CMPD, can't be discounted. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clearly articulated before we get started. Moving into our crime data, CMPD ended the second quarter June 30th with an overall 4.3% increase in overall reported crime compared to last year. Much of this is due to property crime changes. We'll go into some of that detail for you. Property crime itself increased 6%. In the news media, you often talk about things like robberies. A robbery is not a property crime. A robbery is where somebody approaches someone and through implied use of a firearm or a weapon or other means intimidates somebody into giving them someone. Burglary is the term that's the correct use. So when we talk about residences getting broken into, homes being broken into, it's burglary. Same for commercial properties. Both of those categories experienced increases in the second quarter. A lot of what we attribute that to is the change in the work cycle. And as we continue to come out of the COVID pandemic, we see changes in how businesses are employing people, moving maybe a little bit away from staying at home and working and going back into the workplace. The criminals who are also working recognize that. And so they understand fewer people at home. I can take advantage of that opportunity and go and break into a house. That's concerning for us. A lot of things that homeowners can do to protect themselves. Our Crime Stoppers folks offer myriad tips on how you can continue to protect your property while you're away, and we encourage you to reach out to us in that regard. Commercial crime. Commercial crime impact sometimes isn't really seen by the public because a lot of it happens at night, overnight hours. It can be something, for example, an individual throws a rock through a pane of glass at a convenience store and targets money that's left inside. It can be something more significant, for example, where somebody breaks into a warehouse and steals significant quantities of property, for example, new shoes or other things like that. We've seen both of those things throughout the quarter. That continues to happen. We're hoping that with an economy that is hopefully reviving itself and we continue to see businesses flowing into Charlotte, the Charlotte market is very, very busy. So there are increased opportunities for victimization there. For us in patrol and for my responsibility, the biggest issue for us on the property side is regarding auto crimes. So when we talk about auto crimes, we talk about automobiles. There are a couple things that happen. Cars get broken into. Cars also get stolen. Our bad guys, and I'm talking about not only adults but youth, some kids as young as 13 years of age are taking advantage of this. And they're stealing cars from driveways. They're stealing cars from convenience stores, parking lots, where people are leaving these cars unattended. I'm going out, I'm filling up with gas, I want to run inside and get a drink, and I leave my car there with the window down, the key in the ignition, or the key fob sitting in a cup holder, and that car's running. And these kids are jumping in the car and they're taking off. And let me tell you what's even worse. Guns. Firearms. Because firearms very often are left by owners in these cars. And so you get a 14 or 15-year-old kid that hops in this car. Now they don't, not only do they have a car, they have a firearm. Think about that. We'll go into that a little bit further in a minute when we talk about violent crime. Car break-ins are concerning, but we're having some success. The divisions have been working, especially with apartment complexes where we see trends happen, and then also with large commercial areas, especially around retail. So the divisions are working with the community partners for reduction. Our community coordinators go out. We meet with apartment complex management regularly. As new complexes are built, we go out and we talk about security. We also reach out to individual residents to talk to them. We'll sweep parking lots and look at vehicles. And if we see cars that are unattended or things that are left inside vehicles, we'll notify those owners about not doing that. Because really, this is about personal choices. This is about me, the individual, saying I'm not going to do things which are going to allow me to become a victim. And that's locking your car, taking your car keys out, taking that spare key out. Folks, it's a broken record. It's not just me. You know, every officer that stands up here in front of this podium that talks to the news media, we say the same thing over and over and over. And the reason that we do it is because people don't listen. Folks don't listen. And I'll be honest with you, I get it. It's a busy world out there, but folks go through world with blinders on. I'm thinking about everything else I need to do today. I'm thinking about my work, I'm thinking about my kids, I'm thinking about my relationship, and so I don't take the time to focus. I'll be quite honest with y'all. I'm a victim of crime. This year, I had a car that got broken into because my wife didn't lock the car up in the driveway. And guess what? Somebody took advantage that day to come down our street, going through and checking door handles, and went into one of my cars. So even I can be mistake prone. But just goes to show you that, we got to be thinking about that. We have to think about that all the time. That way we can all work together to reduce opportunities for crime. So let's talk about violent crime. Violent crime's up 3%. And to Chief Jennings, that is always our highest concern. It's our highest priority at CMPD to address violent crime. There is a caveat, however, because with the increase in overall numbers and the number of incidents, the number of victims in those incidents has actually reduced. So CMPD reports our data to the FBI's National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. And the way that NIBRS looks at this data is they look at the incident itself, and then they look at the number of people who are involved. So on a violent crime side, a trend that we've seen for some years now is shooting into occupied property. And that can be a motor vehicle, it can be a residence, it can be a commercial business. If somebody shoots into a building and there are a lot of people in that building, then all those people count as individual victims for the purpose of that data reporting. So when we talk about this and we talk about shooting in occupied property, this is really where I get frustrated, because folks have resorted to and have lost a degree of reasonableness. Now what happens is there's this frustration that we see where folks are getting angry, and rather than taking other opportunities and looking at conflict resolution and trying to work out these problems, the first thing they go to is a firearm. That can happen road rage, and anybody who's driven in Charlotte traffic knows how bad Charlotte traffic is. People get upset. And, I was talking a minute ago about people having blinders on, right? You got the blinders on, and I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. And, there's my exit. I'm going to miss it. So I cut across 4 lanes of traffic to make my exit, and I cut off another motorist. Guy spills his coffee in his lap. Now he's mad at you. Pulls up to you at the next light, pulls out that gun. Used to be sometimes they would just point it at you. Now they're actually shooting at people. So please help us. Pay attention to what you're doing. Bypass the exit. Go down to the next one. Take that next exit. Don't do things that are going to make other people so angry that they would resort to gun violence and perhaps victimize you. We talk about shooting in occupied homes, residences. Let me tell y'all, it's a miracle our numbers just aren't worse than they are, because I'll be honest with you, when I see how little it takes for somebody to get upset and to actually go to a home and to sit outside that home in the dark of night and empty a handgun or a rifle into a residence, it's disgusting. It is disgusting, because people don't take into account, I may be mad at someone else, but I don't know if grandma's in there, grandbabies, aunts, uncles, friends. Personally, as a bad guy, probably don't care. But the fact of the matter is that we have innocent people that are on the receiving end of those bullets. I have stood in front of cameras at scenes too many times in the last couple of years talking about children, young people who have been struck by stray gunfire, heard gunfire going off, went and looked out the window, and are struck by a bullet. Where is the community? Where are people marching in the street and saying, we are tired of this? Where is it? Because I don't see it. And that has to be part of the conversation. The community has to be engaged. The community has to say, we are sick and tired of this. And we're tired of innocent people being on the receiving end of bullets just because somebody got dissed in social media. It should never happen. So I'm going to move into violent crime with youth. And when we talk about youth, and we talk about the Raise the Age movement and programs that have occurred not just in North Carolina but across multiple states, we tend to look at people between the ages of 13 and 18 because those are the ones most commonly involved in the serious crime and the ones that are most commonly charged with the serious crimes. I talked about the auto thefts earlier. We had some incidents that occurred here across the northern part of Mecklenburg County in the Charlotte area a couple of months ago where we had groups of teens ranging from 13 to 18 years old that were stealing multiple automobiles at a time. We charged 8 people in one case. We charged another 5 in another case. They were responsible for almost 13 separate auto thefts. And if you think that a 13 or 14-year-old is an inexperienced driver, you'd be fooling yourself, because some of these folks have led us on pursuits where we didn't know how old the people were that are inside the vehicle, because officers don't know that. When they get behind a car that's been involved in a shooting and that car is stolen and we are authorized by policy to pursue and we start that pursuit, we don't know who's in that car. Mothers, fathers, you should know. You should know where your kids are. You should know what they're doing. You should know where they are and who they're with. The responsibility for the police certainly is to address crime, but there's also a responsibility that goes with parenting and having children. And very, very often we see situations where kids are having to be taken care of by aunts or uncles or grandparents. Is that really where the responsibility lies? I ask you. Since the beginning of the year, 118 juveniles have been involved as perpetrators of firearms-related offenses. 118. That's not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable to anyone. If you're a parent, if you're a mother or father of one of these children, that shouldn't be acceptable to you. There have been 482 juvenile victims of firearms-related violent crimes, including murder. Both as the shooter and the victim, juveniles. So the gun possession, I talked about car break-ins, I talked about auto theft, guns being unsecured at home, gun owners. You have a gun at your house, if you don't know where it is and you haven't seen it, you better go find it. You better make sure that it's properly secured in a gun safe or another gun lock. Cmpd offers gun locks, and we have for years. We've offered those to individuals so you can properly secure your firearms. We've seen kids taking parents' guns and going to school, CMS schools, with firearms. Talk about that in a minute. Ending the third week in just the third week of June alone, we had 200 cars broken into, reported to CMPD. 75 of those were unlocked, 28 firearms stolen. And our folks work hard. I'm telling you right now, our officers, the division officers, our crime reduction teams, patrol officers, our crime gun suppression team work hard. We concentrate on guns because guns are the critical key to reducing the victimization rate. Robberies, shootings, homicides, aggravated assaults, all those pieces. The problem is that even though we get those guns off the street, there's a continuing supply and flow of firearms because people don't properly take care of the ones they own. And that's leaving them under the seat in your car or in the center console or leaving them up in the top of the closet. Trust me, kids know where to look for them. They know exactly where to look for guns, and that is gold to them. That is gold. At the end of the 2021-2022 school year, 23 firearms have been seized on CMS campuses. That is thanks to the joint efforts of CMPD, CMS law enforcement, and school administration, because we do care. The school environment is no place for any kind of violence. Teachers have a hard enough time trying to make sure that kids learn what they need to learn without having to worry about whether or not there's going to be a threat in the school. Certainly, school threats are a big piece of what we have to manage, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but we are committed to the safety of students, teachers, administration, and our school campuses. School REAS officers are trained, CMPD officers are trained. We train annually in school shooting response. The situation in Texas is something that we looked at right away. And we looked at all of the things that happened and the things that were reported out, and we said we're looking at ourselves internally to make sure that the training that we do doesn't result in a situation where we don't take care of our kids and we don't address an active shooter. I can tell you personally that CMPD gets the training, and our response will be swift if a situation should ever occur in our jurisdiction. And I hope that the public has confidence in our ability to do that and our partnership with our law enforcement partners. We talked about some of the auto theft situations that we had dealt with earlier in the last few months. I'll give you a couple more examples here of some other things that we dealt with. Earlier this month, a 14-year-old individual that had been charged with prior crimes and was on an electronic monitoring device removed that device after committing an armed robbery. CMPD obtained warrants for that individual's arrest. Our detectives and patrol officers worked very quickly to get those warrants. However, while looking for him, that individual committed 3 separate shootings into occupied properties. 3. Just like I talked about a moment ago. 3 different houses over the course of 2 days, July 4th and July 5th. This same 14-year-old went on to drive a stolen car taken from one of the shooting scenes. And when officers located that stolen car on July 5th, he, along with a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, led officers on a pursuit that went into Cornelius. Without regard, without care. All they want to do is get away from the police. They're not thinking about what they're doing. They're not thinking about the danger they propose to themselves, other motorists. That's just not going through the heads of these youth. Thankfully, all 3 suspects were apprehended before they could seriously hurt someone. Another example, in May, officers arrested 2 brothers. And because all of these folks are juveniles, I can't tell their names to you at this time. However, they were aged 15 and 17 years old, 15 and 17, for possession of firearms. They attended West Charlotte High School. CMPD does all of the investigative work, and we're able to find people, and we're able to arrest people. But I'd like the public to know and understand there's a difference between adults and juveniles. And the raise the age change has really changed and altered the way that police are able to engage and detain violent criminals. And if you don't think that a 13 or 14 or 15 or 16-year-old kid can kill somebody, you're wrong. They can, and they do. And when somebody does something like that, and the system has changed and prevents the police and the district attorney's office from taking that individual and putting them somewhere where they're no longer a danger to the public until their trial happens, that's a huge problem for Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Significant problem. The juvenile arrest process as it works now is that if you are a kid, if you are a youth, and let's say you're 14 or 15 years old, and you've committed crimes for the last couple of years. Let's say you started out by stealing things from a store, and then you moved on to breaking into cars, and then you move on to breaking into homes, and then you get a gun. You have a gun from the car or the house you broke into, and you're carrying that gun with you. You might get caught for carrying a concealed weapon. You might use that gun to rob somebody. You might use that gun to maybe think about protecting yourself from somebody else who has a gun that you know, or you might shoot somebody with that gun. The juvenile justice system uses a points system in North Carolina. You generate points based on the offenses you commit, the severity of those offenses, and how many offenses you're actually convicted of in court. Juvenile court counselor is the individual who is basically the same as a magistrate for an adult. That juvenile court counselor determines whether or not an individual has what we call a secure custody order issued. The secure custody order is essentially the same thing as a warrant, but what it does is remand the custody of that child or youth to a detention facility, basically a youth jail. You have to hit all the points. If you don't hit all the points, we don't get the secure custody order. If we don't get the secure custody order, you know where that kid goes? They go right back home. Right back home. And let's say grandma, who is 75 or 80 years old, is having to take care of a 14 or 15-year-old youth, and that kid doesn't want to listen to grandma. Grandma can't control that child, can't keep him in the house, doesn't know where to go, and really they're not really even a child any longer because the things that they're doing are adult-level stuff. Is that the best situation? Is that the best solution? Things have to change. The public needs to take a good, hard look at the juvenile justice system in the state of North Carolina and the county of Mecklenburg about how it operates. Most people say, if it doesn't affect me, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Until they watch the media outlets that I'm in front of right now and they see a 17-year-old kid dead on the ground and we're charging another 15 or 16 or 17-year-old in that murder. If you don't think that affects our people, if you don't think it affects our officers, you're fooling yourself. I spent a lot of my time trying to keep our folks' heads in the game because they see the death, they see the wanton loss of life, they see the lost potential for kids. Lost potential for kids. there's another responsibility, and that responsibility lies straight at the feet of mothers and fathers. When I use the term parent, to me, parent means that as a mother and a father, you're actively engaged in what your child does. You know where they are. You talk about school. You try to discipline them. You try to do those things that you can to get that kid to be successful. We have a lot of parents that have zero engagement. To me, that's a mother and father. You gave birth to the child, but you're not an active parent. We need active parents. CMPD needs the support, the participation, and the partnership of active parents to negate this youth violence. It's got to happen, folks. You need to look at your kids' phones. You need to know who they're beefing with. You need to know where they're going to go fight when they're stepping out that door at midnight. You need to know. CMPD can't be the only one who are dealing with this. The teen that I was talking about to you a moment ago, the West Charlotte High School teens, they were released to family members and allowed to go home. The very next week, June the 15th, the teens fired weapons in the middle of their apartment complex on Southwest Boulevard. Those bullets not only struck vehicles and nearby cars, but an occupied apartment. One of those cars had an 11-year-old child sitting in that car, and that child was struck by a bullet. That child suffered life-threatening injuries that will have lifelong after effects. Is that fair? Where's the community outrage? Where are people approaching your elected officials and reaching out to the government agencies and all of the parties that are involved to say, enough is enough? We've got to change this. It can't just be CMPD. The stats and the things that I hold before you, the numbers here, we show our work. That's why we report this to you. We show you our work. But the continued loss of life and when I say loss of life, I'm not just talking about people who die. I'm talking about the kids and the youth who are growing up who lose the potential for their lives to be successful. That's really what I just want to concentrate on today. CMPD's efforts include a lot of things. We have a juvenile diversion plan. We recognize that not every kid that goes out and does some of these things in that career path that I was telling you about is going to end up murdering somebody. So we recognize that. And when we find and engage with kids that have made mistakes and we know that there's an opportunity for them to change, we send them into a juvenile diversion program. That's just one of 25 different engagement efforts that provide structure, life skills, and opportunities for change. That diversion program allows kids to attend training sessions, work with social media engagement, trying to get them to move out of that violent circle and understand there are other ways to handle things. CMPD has summer camp programs. We got 75 kids right now in a summer camp program. They're walking all over police headquarters and having a great time. It's giving them something to do during the summer, and it's an opportunity for us to engage our officers with them so that kids can see that, you know, an officer isn't just that badge. It's a human being inside the polyester uniform, right? That's what it's all about. It's human beings. We're engaging with these kids because we truly, deeply care about our youth. I won't be here for forever in this uniform. The officers that are behind me, when they retire, it's a constant cycle. We know, and all of us, especially the old folks, where we've seen the progression of kids starting out young as youth and moving their way up and ending up in prison, we got to find a way to fix it. We really do. Crime Stoppers. I will mention that. So Crime Stoppers has been very successful, continues to be a very successful program for us. 776 tips just this quarter, second quarter of this year. That resulted in 83 arrests, over 185 cases cleared. CMPD paid out over $5,000 in reward money to people, to individuals that contacted us via Crime Stoppers to help us clear cases. The value of recovered items just from those tips exceeded $1.5 million. That includes $1.4 million in recovered stolen property, $7,000 in cash, and $95,000 worth of drugs that were recovered thanks to those tips. Also like to mention our airport division. Our airport division is one of the largest drug seizure units within CMPD. To date this year, they've seized over 4,000 pounds of marijuana that has been shipped into this market through the airport. That's almost 2 tons of marijuana. In addition, they've seized a significant amount of cash And they also continue to help us by seizing firearms that are either being tried to be passed through security or being shipped through illegally by individuals who are traveling into the Charlotte-Mecklenburg market. I've touched on the work that's been done by CMPD. I've touched on the youth violence and the things that we're asking for help from the public and the community support for. I will open the floor for any questions that you folks may have, but I will end by saying that we have seized 1,447 firearms this year. I got so many guns I don't have any place to put them in my evidence area at CMPD headquarters. That's up 9% from last year, and it's 39% over our 5-year average for seized firearms. So again, this firearm flow is critical to our success to be able to reduce these violent crime numbers. So open the floor for any questions from news media regarding any of the stats and anything that I've talked about.
That juvenile arrest process that you were talking about in the point system, did that change recently? Do you know when and who made that change? Who's responsible?
The point system hasn't changed. What did change is that a larger number of individuals based on age were subject to that point system. So the juvenile justice, the raise the age change took a sector of those kids, basically 16 to 18-year-old, where in the past, North Carolina law allowed us to basically charge an individual at that age as an adult for an offense, especially related to violent crime. Shooting somebody, a murder, multiple auto thefts or property crimes, we could charge a person as an adult in those cases. The raise the age law changed that and said all of those folks now are diverted into the juvenile justice system. So I'll say this, as parents, I'm a parent, I talk to parents, I see parents, we talk to victim parents. Parents often look at a kid who is 16 or 17 or 18 years old and they see in their head that beautiful child, that firstborn child, that young baby, the toddler running around the house. They see that. In their head, that's what they're seeing. Emotionally, that's what they're seeing. But the changes in society, social media, the exposure to violence, those things age youth very rapidly. So by the time they get to be 16 and 17 and 18-year-old, that exposure has changed them and makes them fully capable of committing offenses that an adult would. I'm a police officer. CMPD, our responsibility is to follow the letter of the law, to investigate crimes and charge people. You, the public, are responsible for what you want us and what you want from your juvenile justice system to do. What we're saying is that we see some value in making sure that some youth don't have to go through the adult justice system. We understand that. However, the violent criminals, those are the ones that are not